Welcome to Advanced Passion, the show where I invite a guest to evangelize me about something they are passionate. It could be a place, a person, a book, a movie, something they like to eat, pretty much anything at all. I'm Ben Jack, and today I am delighted to be joined by a great friend, a great man, and a great doctor all the way from Johannesburg, South Africa, Dr. Desmond Henry.
Hey, Ben Jack. Great to be with you, bro.
A great doctor, but maybe not in the sense that if I, needed some medical treatment, maybe more if I needed some theological correction.
Yeah, I mean, the sum total of my medical help would be some duct tape and a pair of scissors. We should be good to go.
Hey, that can get you through a lot of problems, to be fair. So you wouldn't be too far off, but which again shows the extent of my medical knowledge as well. Des, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What do you get up to?
Well, hey, Ben, it's my joy to serve as the director of the Global Network of Evangelists, where we seek to elevate and accelerate evangelism right around the globe. And so it's awesome just to be a part of the unfolding story of people around the world, not only having a desire to share their faith, but being equipped more readily in exactly that same way. And so, yeah, that's what I get to do. That's my day job. And then, of course, I'm married to Lara, have 3 beautiful girls, enjoy a lot of different things, I guess, but cycling, if I can keep on the bike, that is, and gardening, walking, different things as well. And as we'll come to see later on, I enjoy, or have at least enjoyed working on a 1972 VW Bug.
Oh, a little spoiler alert there for what we might be talking about very soon. We're going to get there. You're so passionate to talk about it. You're already drip feeding what you're going to be talking about today.
Come on.
We're going to get there. But before we do, I'm curious about this global network of evangelists. Why, in your view, is it important to have such a thing as a global network of evangelists?
Yeah, well, I mean, great. Hey, 3 points for you: global, network, and evangelist.
Okay.
It's like a Baptist sermon right here. So there we go. So first point is, I mean, hey, Christianity is a global religion. We need to celebrate the fact that there are Christians in almost every single nation around the world, and that's fantastic. It is certainly a global, it is a diverse religion, and so ultimately, being global means that we think globally and not just in one kind of way, and so embrace the diversity that comes from that as well. We're a network in that we like to connect people, mission, and ideas and innovation, and that's how we see ourselves serving. We don't get all the work done on our own. We team up with other organizations, evangelists, and people to collaborate in order that Christ's mission would go further, and would do so in an accelerated way, rather than just the sort of 1+1 linear kind of addition. We want to see the exponential growth of the gospel around the world. And then we're a network of evangelists. And so evangelists are those who are deeply passionate about, speaking to others about the person of Jesus Christ and seeing them come into a right relationship with the Lord. They're deeply passionate about connecting people to Christ, and do that in different ways. And so at GNE, we have a saying, one message and many expressions. And so we embrace it, that even among evangelists, there are such diversity of ways that we could reach people with the gospel. And we embrace every way and celebrate every form of evangelism, as far as it is, of course, biblical and holistic in its approach as well.
Beautiful. And if people want to check out a little bit more about the network, and even consider signing up and joining and going through that whole process, you can do that at evangelist.global, and we'll put a link to that in the description below, because I'm reliably informed that's what the cool YouTube kids do. They put links in the description below. And of course, if you are watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss any of these great conversations. Like the video. I mean, why wouldn't you want to like a video with Des in it? Look at that stylish haircut and those glasses and that Lions top. And I'm so ignorant about sport, I don't even know what that Lions top is. Is that like a local rugby?
thought you were my friend. Like, how can you not know who the Lions are? It's like
I'm just messing with you.
who's Leeds United? Anyway,
And
let's not
so
go
yeah, so
there.
like the video. That's the point that I was making. Des doesn't like me anymore, but you can like this video and as well leave a comment as well. And if you want to know who the Lions are, maybe leave a comment in the box. Maybe Des will respond or something with some useless information about them. Good. Speaking of
Shots
useful
fired.
information, shots fired left, right, and center here, but it's good. We have to stoke the fire before we get into the good stuff, Des. And the good stuff is not useless information, but useful information that you have about cars and your passion for cars, because today your passion is what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. Gonna be good.
So
You want me to jump in?
I want you to fill our minds with the
Come on.
joy
These
of
introductions take so long, Ben.
V
Come on. I'm
Dubs.
like so excited to tell you about this.
Let's go. Hit me. What is your passion? Talk us through it.
Ah, there we go. Finally. Phew. Well, hey, now that you subscribed to this channel and heard Ben's amazing introduction here, I want to share with you just about one of the passions that I've enjoyed over the last probably about 15 months of the pandemic. And so to give you a bit of a backstory, a number of years ago, in fact, when I was still dating my wife now, well, the lady who now is my wife, let me phrase it in that kind of way. Uh, she was super smart, and so when she went to university, they actually paid her to study. How cool is that? So she got a scholarship, and so her parents had already paid her fees in advance, and so she had the scholarship money and said, "Hey, what do I do with this money?" And the Lord laid on her heart, God bless her, to buy me a 1968 VW Passat automatic. Now, I didn't have a car. That was my very, very first car. And what an amazing woman, right? That she would do that for me. And so that car was amazing. It was like a tank. You could take it anywhere. It was incredible. But it was just such a nightmare to operate. It broke down half the time. It wasn't fun. So I was very grateful to get rid of that vehicle. I learned a lot about mechanics, how things work, where the actual engine is, for starters. So anyway, then kind of fast forward probably like 20 years later, we're in this global pandemic, and because of our move to Portland, I went and sold. We had two cars, and so I sold one of them, thinking I'll just Uber if I need to go somewhere, and quickly realized during a pandemic that I don't particularly like the idea of getting into a stranger's car and going different places. And so I jokingly said to my wife, "Hey, let me just get a pretty decent used Beetle and fiddle around with it a bit." And so she responded and said, "That's a great idea." I did not anticipate that response at all. And so I tested it and said, "Really? Is that are you sure?" And so she said, "Yeah." And so immediately I went online and started the search and looked at different models online, and actually went out eventually and bought a VW, a 72 VW Bug. I was so excited, brought it home, and then it didn't start in our driveway. And so my wife looked at me thinking like, "Are you nuts? Like, didn't you say you're going to buy something that actually works? You need a car that's going to drive somewhere." So the amazing journey of restoring this 1972 Beetle kind of began. And so it's a great vehicle to play around with, because the parts are freely available, and it wasn't in a horrible condition. So it was nicely painted. The interior we had redone, and we had really cool mag wheels fitted. I was so excited about the mag wheels, because that really it's an old car, and so that kind of gives it a nice fresh kind of look, gives it some sort of Ben Jack swag to it. It's pretty cool. And yeah, so we started the journey of just revamping this car, and there's a lot of lessons I learned along the way about revamping an old car. Number one, like, you need the right tools to be able to tackle some of these projects, and
Right.
and so that was another struggle in some ways. You get midway doing something and you figure, oh, you don't have a spanner for that, and so you got to get in a car, go to the shop, get a spanner, come back, fix the problem. But it's just been an incredible joy. And so Yeah, we've I think fixed it up mostly. The only thing that has not been replaced is, which I guess is pretty important, I think, is the steering wheel box. And so there's a box that basically it's kind of like giving a little bit of play when you go around the corner. So it's not quite
Right.
slipping, but I don't feel super comfortable with that. But apart from that, we've fitted a manual pump onto the engine block. They had an electric pump there for some time, but it was just blocking the carburetor up, and so it would go, and then it would just literally stop. And so you have to kind of clean it out and get going again. Strange things that you discover, I guess, only once you look underneath the bug and get it
Right.
going. They'd welded the end caps to where the wheels are fitted, and so yeah, that eventually would probably just like break off as you're driving down the road, and you'd have
Right.
a nasty accident. So there's a lot of hidden things we had to fix. Thankfully, there was no rust, which was great. And so the little bit of rust that there was taken care of and treated properly, and so it's been really fun. One of the great stories I have, at least with my bug, is my daughter Gabriella. She's 13 years of age. She's a real teenager, and so she said to me when she saw this car, "Dad, do not come and fetch me in that car from school ever. Like, please don't
Yeah.
do that." And so, of
Right.
course, what does Dad do? I arrive early. I find the prime parking spot
You're a cruel
right in
dad.
front of the school. Well, it's my job to embarrass her. That's my job as a parent, right? And so it kind of backfired a little bit. So she sees me and she's like unbelievably ashamed. Like, "I can't believe you'd even think of doing that. How can you do this to me? Don't you love me?" And so she walks out, and I had the front open, and I was playing some music. I was really trying to draw attention to our vehicle. And so she comes, puts her bag in, and she's like, let's go, Dad. Don't wait. Take me home. Quickly, get in. And don't backfire this thing." And so anyway, I get in the car. And just at that point, one of the boys in her class walks past, and she gets this horror, sort of a look of horror on her face, like, "Oh no, it's all over. Everyone's going to know." And
Social
so
death.
this
Yeah.
exactly, it's all over right now. And this kid looks at Gabby and says, "Gabby, is this your car?" Well, I hope he meant like my car, but anyway, that's a story for another day. And she goes, "Yeah, that's my car," very sheepishly. And he looks at her and he says, "Wow, that's dope." And so from that day on, the only car I'm ever allowed to drive to fetch her in is the VW Bug. Fun times with teenagers. But yeah, I love the car. It's great to drive. But another thing that I really love about the Bug is the conversation that goes around with people. I stop and fill the car at a petrol station. I, pump, air into the tires, go somewhere. Everyone always comments on the car, like, "Oh my word,
Cool.
that's so cool. How'd you do that?" And so it really
Mm.
provides amazing opportunities just to kind of speak with people, which is awesome as you engage with people a little bit more, not only on the actual car, but as a pathway to sharing the gospel with others as well.
Okay, so there's so many things that we can pick up from what we've talked about so far. But before we start jumping into some specific things, I'm really fascinated by the whole car thing, because I think there's three kinds of car people in the world. There's people that don't like cars at all.
Yeah,
They're just not car people. There's car people who know everything about cars. Maybe you'd fall into that category. You know where things are supposed to go. And if you don't know, you're enthusiastic to learn and develop that skill. And then there's people that think that they're car people, like me. Because I like, I see an Aston Martin and I'm like, oh yeah, I like the look of that. I like that. And I like the sound of the engine and this, that, and the other. But actually, I have no knowledge of anything to do with cars. If my car breaks down, I'm clueless about how to actually solve the problem or fix it. But I totally get the kind of compulsion and desire to fix something up. And my wife's been like openly mocking me recently, and quite rightly so as well,
yeah,
because I've got into this YouTube channel where this guy, he takes old electronics equipment, so maybe old games consoles, old PlayStations,
yeah,
things like that, they're completely battered and yellowed, the plastic is all yellowed, the internals don't work. He buys them cheap off eBay, and then he refurbs them, and he shows the video of how he restores them. The external plastic gets it all looking good, the internals, with all the electronics and stuff, he gets it looking good. And I find it so compelling, and it's so satisfying to see this broken, battered thing that can no longer do what it used to be able to do. And then by the end of the video, it's restored. So obviously for you, there was like some nostalgia over this car, and there was like a personal connection to this type of car. Obviously you wanted a vehicle that you could drive around, but what is it about the kind of actually investing your time into restoring it and putting your energy into that? That's what separates out like real car people from just people that think they're car people, right?
Yeah. And I mean, hey, I love the VW Beetle because I think it was one of the first cars that I looked at, probably besides the Mini, and went like, man, as a kid, I really want to drive that car. And so having the opportunity of taking one and seeing it be transformed is just so cool and so amazing. And I think there's something creative about the human heart that God has placed this maybe not even a need, but this desire on so many people's hearts to see what is broken kind of be restored and be made new again in some ways. And so for me, that was awesome just to kind of see that. And I couldn't do too much damage when things like didn't work, like my wiring. I blew up my wiring, and electrics is not my thing. So I knew a guy, phoned the guy, he came and fixed it and rescued me from that problem. So even if you don't know everything, YouTube helps, and phone a guy, phone a friend who knows.
Well, I love that because that's like collaboration as well. And again, there's so many like gospel themes to that, right? I know that's a big thing for you. Like you're passionate about teamwork and collaboration, working together. That's the whole point of having a network of evangelists, that we're not just lone rangers, a diverse group of people working in diverse ways. And I think that can be the danger for us, can't it? Not just in ministry, but definitely in ministry, but not just in ministry. So many areas of our lives, we can end up going Lone Ranger style, thinking that we have to be the ones to do it, thinking that we're the ones that will do the best job of it. But the truth is, there's not that many people that have that breadth of skills to be able to actually do what needs to be done in most areas of life.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if anyone kind of tells you that they have all the gifts, all the talents, all the abilities to be able to handle it, I mean, they're lying. That just simply doesn't exist out there for sure.
Yeah. So as you're like working on this car and you're tinkering around under the hood there, and you're thinking about like restoration, that obviously brings clear parallels with the restoration that comes with the power of the gospel and this, that, and the other. I love the imagery of seeing things being restored, and that preciousness of the fact that the gospel itself is the ultimate restoring story, and that the power that comes through that. And again, I love the fact that you made this connection, that in our hearts we have this kind of the beauty of our hearts. We have this desire to fix things and to be fixed, and so on and so forth. And what are some other ways that you've seen that kind of play out in the way that people interact with their hobbies and their passions in life?
Well, I think, in many ways, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, is a kind of saying that we have here. And I think that that's certainly true in terms of the Beetle that I've restored. Some people can probably look at it and go like, why would you drive that car? I mean, it's like 40 something years old. I mean, why would you? It has no air conditioning. I mean, like when you get out of the Beetle, you kind of smell like a petrol head, actually, which is, I love. I think it's great, but some people may not like that too much. And so, I mean, I think your hobbies, show a little bit about who you are as an individual as well. And with the Beetle itself, I think its value is not determined in what it originally cost or what its original value was, but it's determined by the buyer, someone who would look at it and attribute value to that. And so, that just reminds me so much of, the Lord and of what he's done for me personally, where he looks into my life and he saw value in me that others, and I certainly didn't see in myself. And he redeemed me, and he is at work right now restoring me. It's taking a long time. It's taking a lot of extra parts, It's taking a lot of polishing, a lot of breaking down, but
Mm.
ultimately it'll result in an incredible, hopefully, an incredible piece of art that would glorify him
Mm.
ultimately until he
Wow. Yeah.
takes me home to be with him.
Wow. I think as well it's a good metaphor for the idea that we can think with restoration that it's a one-way journey. Like we're
Yeah,
broken and we get fixed, and that fixing just kind of moves us from point A to B. But I'm guessing from your experience that actually it's a little bit more jaggedy than that, because you fix something and then it
yeah,
breaks again and then it needs some more work. And I think there's something quite authentic about the journey of fixing up a car or a piece of electronic equipment or whatever, where yes, you hope that you fix it and you hope that it will work, but inevitably there are little things that still go wrong along the way. And in some ways, that's a better picture for the reality of our journey with Christ than some of the idealized versions that we get in certain discipleship,
yeah,
tools and things that seem to almost suggest like our discipleship journey will just be going from point A to point B and you'll get better and that won't be a problem for you anymore and that won't be a problem for you anymore. And of course, there's a hope there, and certainly in the power of God there's the possibility of that. But actually the reality of life reveals to us, and out of God's wisdom of how we should journey through this life, there are moments of sometimes taking a step back where we've taken a couple of steps forward.
absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I actually went about this restoration, actually, and this process. Because I think far too often we're always interested in the perfect, the beautiful.
Mm.
If I was going to buy a car, I would buy something that worked and actually would take me from point A to point B. And I remember actually driving my daughter Olivia to soccer the one day, and we were going down the road, and I felt just like a little bit of a shudder in the car, and I probably should have turned back and went home. I thought, oh, it'll be okay. We'll just keep going. And we got literally into the middle of the intersection, and the Beetle just shut down. And she looked over at me with these like eyes as if to say, oh no, like soccer's over. We're never going to make it there in time. And so we kind of had to push the car in, and I got it into the side of the road and eventually into a garage, and we left it there. And so I just Ubered to get it to the lesson, came back, and it's been teaching me a lot about patience and about the fact that we're all a work in progress, and it's been teaching my kids a little bit about that kind of stuff as well.
Mm.
And so it's been a great point of contact. Just working on the Beetle. In some ways, I mean, just this morning I haven't driven it for a while, so the battery was flat. And so I had to get that going. And my daughter I taught her where to find the accelerator cable in the
Right.
engine, and she was helping me do that while I was fiddling with other things. And
Cool.
all of these teach us important lessons about the fact that yes, life is not perfect, even though we are God's restored projects. There are things that go wrong all the time, and so often, as you so rightly say, the image that often gets projected out there is, hey, once you get saved, everything is great. You never have any difficulties in your life.
Yeah.
There's nothing that'll ever go wrong. You just become perfect, and that is an absolute fallacy. And so when we are saved, sure, there is a huge change that happens. It's absolutely transformational, but God's work in us is a process rather than just one-off event. And so that process, I guess, is called sanctification technically.
Mm.
And that
Yeah.
that is continuously being made holy, being made perfect. And yeah, there's going to be broken parts and things that need replacing in our lives. And it's all part of God's work in our lives.
I think as well that you said something really interesting there about newness, and I think the world has an obsession with newness, and God
Yeah,
has an obsession with newness. But God's obsession with newness is holy and good. The world's obsession with newness is often quite unhelpful, I think. And like you were saying, the general idea is if it's broken these days, we chuck it away and we buy the
right.
new thing, the shiny thing, the good looking thing, the thing that will work better than the thing that you had before. And it's always newness. And I think for those who are not following Jesus, that brings with it then this constant desire for a new thing that will bring satisfaction. For For those that are following Jesus, the danger will always be if somehow some part of your faith feels like it's not how you want it to be, you'll go looking for something new, and you'll actually start to even create a Christian faith in your image rather than in God's, or the image of some other person who's come up with a newfangled new fad. And so this newness thing can be really dangerous and really damaging. And yet you have to reconcile that with the fact that God is continually talking about newness in the Bible. Actually, the gospel is a story of newness, and that, see, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? That we will become new creations, and so on and so forth. So how would you reconcile those things? The newness of God's, I mean, God's obsessed with newness, clearly, but it seems to be a holy and positive thing. The world's obsession with newness seems to be quite destructive at times. How would you kind of reconcile those things together?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point of correlation. And I think, very simply, if I drive down the road, I have a Renault Duster, it's an SUV, it's a pretty nice car, but no one looks at my car when I drive past. I just drive past pretty much unnoticed. And there's a new version of my vehicle that's better, faster, more fuel efficient than the one I have right now. But when I drive my VW Beetle down the road, almost every third or fourth car kind of like, driver kind of looks at me. If I stop at a traffic light, they will wind down their window and talk with me. And I mean, here's the deal. There is not going to be another Beetle made in that range. It is an old range and something that has been completely redone. Yet that is something that draws people's attention more than my brand new car, or even the latest model of my car will, per se. And so I think there is tremendous value in the newness that comes from, an artist, if you like, kind of pouring themselves into something that is a has-been, is something from a previous era, and bringing that to life. We like those resurrection stories as human beings, and I think when it comes to the gospel and newness, that's exactly what we need to see, is not this image of absolute perfection, but this image of continuously being made new. And that for me is such a beautiful thing. In fact, one of my favorite passages of scripture, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. And the old is gone, the new has come. And I love that Greek word. It's the word kainos. And it kind of means it's not something that is just, secondhand and, just revamped. It is something that is completely changed from the inside out, outside in. It's just this complete change. And looking at scripture, another thing that always strikes me is even the New Jerusalem, and God referring to the newness that is to come from eternity as a city, the New Jerusalem descending from heaven to earth, reminds me again that God isn't done with the old, that there is a certain element that God creates and recreates in the mystery of how this will work. I don't understand it at all eschatologically, but I just find it interesting that sure. We'll kind of all be with him in this new Jerusalem, this restored Jerusalem and restored relationship in heaven.
Perhaps it would be better to say, in light of what we've said and in light of what the Bible teaches, we'd be better to say perhaps the world has an obsession with new things, and God has an obsession with renewal.
Right.
Because the newness, the new thing that God is doing is a renewal of what he intended, that we messed up.
Right.
And that God's not just going to simply scrap your life and start over. He's going to renew. He's going to redeem that and create newness from it. Yeah, powerful stuff, really powerful. And another thing that intrigued me, that as you were talking, was about the story of teenage angst over the car appearing outside the school gates. And I'm sure we can all harken back to our own moments of utter horror at what a parent or sibling or someone in our life has done to make us embarrassed when we wanted the ground to swallow us. And yet in this particular situation, it actually turned out to be this cool thing. And again, I think this is kind of interesting little metaphor for Christian faith, because I think there's so many people that are kind of treat their faith a little bit how your daughter treated your car, which is she knows it's important to you and she knows it has value to you, but to her, she hasn't quite grasped the value of it for herself. and she's ashamed, potentially at least, of what other people will think of it. And of course, there's all sorts of parallels there with, you know, people being worried about what others will think of their faith, especially if it's a faith of their family that they've slightly inherited. They didn't necessarily come to it of their own choosing yet. They're kind of just living in it slightly by heritage and upbringing, and it's something that's kind of part of their life, but they haven't really given their lives to Jesus yet. They're just kind of in and around the Jesus experience, or the Jesus facts, probably more than the Jesus experience. And I find it really interesting that how often have you experienced this? Because I certainly have, that what people first thought would be an awkward thing turns out to be a thing of great curiosity and credibility to the world around them.
Yeah. Oh man, tell me about it. I mean, I think one of the way I would kind of phrase it, if I'm hearing you correctly, is, you know, many Christians, they desire to share the gospel, but they don't share the gospel very often, because of a number of different reasons. And I wonder if people's lack of sharing the gospel isn't just a lack of their own experience in or of the gospel itself. And so if we truly know what the gospel is, if we've experienced it, there's no turning back, right? There's also a sense of great joy that comes from that, in understanding the newness that God brings, in forgiving our sin, that we have to share about it. And there's such great value. And so, you know, my daughters had to learn some of the value of that car. It's probably actually more valuable than many cars that look far better or newer, that kind of drop the kids off at school as well. And so once she understood the value of it, and it was affirmed by other people as well, she kind of felt better about that. And so that reminds me again that evangelism is not just about, you know, me sharing. It's also a community thing. We need community around us to encourage us, to affirm us. Much like that young guy said to my daughter, your dad's car is dope. She felt more confident and was able to kind of go, oh, that's cool, Dad. You know, let's hang out in this car more often.
Yeah.
You know, we need to be affirmed sometimes by other people.
Yeah.
And again, God is a community on mission, right? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, triune God on a mission. And so we too need to see our mission in that light as well.
So how do we do that, Des? How do we encourage one another in the gospel when we're feeling a little bit awkward, when we're feeling a little bit fearful of man, or whatever other reason we're struggling with is sharing the gospel? How do we get that community dynamic right, where we're actually actively encouraging one another? No, this gospel is dope. You know, to use the words of your daughter's friend, this gospel is dope, and this evangelism thing is dope, and this is the hope of the world. Keep going, it's cool. And in doing that encouragement, that we'll see more and more and more people starting to flourish in what God has called them to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, firstly, just do it. Like, just get out there and just share the gospel with someone. That's the start. Just share your story, share your testimony with someone else about what Christ has done in your life. And you don't have to frame it in any fancy theological terms or any great biblical depth. Just share with people how God has transformed your own life. Your story can have a profound effect on the lives of other people. So that's the one thing. I mean, just get out there and do it. Engage with people, speak to people, and embrace every opportunity. Every conversation that you have can be turned into a gospel conversation. And so that's something just to always be on the lookout for. But in terms of finding that encouragement, I find, again, surrounding yourself with the right people is tremendously important as well. And so I know I harp on about this, and it's not because this is the advanced podcast that I do that, but my advanced group is a tremendous blessing to me because we meet together once a month, we encourage one another, and sometimes we ask those questions like, hey, when is the last time you have shared your faith personally with other people or with someone else? And just having to know that, like, someone is going to ask me that question when I go to my advanced group, like, I better be able to say to them, at least, like, I've shared the gospel with someone, even if that's the worst possible motivation. But what that does is it really gets me going, thinking like, man, yes, I need to share the gospel with this person. I need to be attentive to hear about what this is, how this plays out in the lives of other people. And doing it in community is also great. If you're out with friends who share your passion for the Lord and for the gospel, you can share the gospel together in a group context as well. And so I find it tremendously encouraging to foster those relationships, to be held accountable in that way. But ultimately, we all know it comes from a passion. Are we passionate about the newness that Christ can bring in the lives of others? A good colleague of mine from Germany, Baron Nachtigall, he sets his alarm for 3 p.m. every day, and his goal is every day to share the gospel with one person. Now, if you live in Germany, that is pretty well. There's a lot of people to share the gospel with because it's a very secular nation. It's a pretty hard thing to do, though, right? I mean, once a day, hit the streets, find someone, share the gospel with them, and whatever the result is, leave that sometimes to the Lord. But just being around him sometimes, even being on a Zoom call with him, is so encouraging because he always reminds us, like, hey, have you reached out to the one person today that needs to hear the good news? And I kind of go, phew, wow, like that's good for me, and good to be challenged in that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's a huge challenge. And what that brings us back to really is intentionality. And if you want your VW Beetle to run, you've got to be intentional about maintaining it as a car, as a piece of machinery. It will inevitably, at some point, something's going to go wrong if you don't change the oil, if you don't put fuel in it, if you don't inflate the tires, even just the basics. Forget about the mechanics, just the basics. You've got to be intentional. And of course, that's a basic truth about our walk with Jesus. We have to be intentional about our own faith, even before we think about witness and evangelism. Just, are we intentionally in the presence of God? That's what it's all about. Being in his presence, giving him his worth, recognizing him for who he is, and responding accordingly. And as we respond to him accordingly, part of that response is then taking that message, his truth, his reality, his identity into the world. In word, we've got to articulate, but indeed, just because we inevitably are going to be transformed in that place of presence, and therefore that will affect our character, our behaviors, the way that we emotionally react to things, the way that we verbally, physically react, but also our activity and our actions into the world, the things that we spend our money on, the things that we give our time to, the way that we interact relationally. All of those things are affected by the intentionality of our relationship. I do worry sometimes that there are even some people that are actually pretty good at being intentional with their relationship with God, but for some reason they then draw a line that intentionality doesn't extend beyond the secret place. So they're great at being intentional in this, like, I pray. I know some fantastic brothers and sisters in the Lord who pray so wonderfully, far more wonderfully than I do. And I'm inspired by them to press into my prayer life even more fully, or read their Bible even more fully than I do. And I'm inspired by them to think about my daily Bible reading and so on and so forth. And there's various spiritual disciplines that I see other people have that I'm like, wow. And yet there seems to still be a bit of a line within that intentionality extending out into witness. And it's almost like we treat witness as almost a different thing entirely to other spiritual disciplines that we are very comfortable with being intentional about. Why do you think that might be, and what could we do about that?
Yeah, well, I think some of it just boils down to sometimes fear. Our culture, generally speaking, is not as welcoming to different perspectives that they would kind of deem as irrelevant really to their perspective. That's a perspective we have. But what I found, though, is that's not really true. Many people would be very open to you sharing the gospel with them, even though they may never have ever heard of the person Jesus or ever walked into a church before at all. And so sometimes we are the obstacle very often in sharing the gospel with other people. Our perceptions, our fears, our insecurity, our thoughts. Sometimes we think we have to have it all figured out. We have to have all the answers for people. I mean, they're going to ask me some deep truth, and I'm not going to know how to answer them. Therefore, I don't want to go and share my faith with other people. And the truth is, you could answer every question someone asks, and your argument is not going to be which wins them to faith. Christ, the Holy Spirit, is at work in every situation where we witness to others. And so the one thing I would say, if there's one thing I would encourage people is this: invite the Holy Spirit into that particular moment and ask for boldness and ask for discernment so that God would guide you in that moment on what to share. Because someone might be very argumentative about creation or evolution or gender issues, whatever that may be, that is bugging them. But really, you would find often the hurt lies elsewhere, and you're able to minister to them if you're discerning. And also, the Holy Spirit brings about a sense of boldness. And I'm always encouraged by the early disciples who were gathered together in the room, and they were fearful of the Jews. And yet, Jesus in John 21 appears among them, and rightly so. In verse 21 says, "Peace be upon you." And then he commissions them in one of the great commissions of the New Testament: as the Father has sent me. And think of the sending of Jesus, and think of humility, think of all that goes with this. So I'm sending you. And so in the same way as Christ came is the same mission that we have. And so there's a sense of boldness, and there's also a sense of humility that comes with sharing the gospel. And so that's what I would kind of say in answer to your question, Ben.
It's a great answer, and that feels like a good point to me as well to wrap this thing up and bring it to a close. Des, thanks so much for your time today, sharing your passion of your VW Beetle. So if anybody happens to be in Johannesburg and sees a bespectacled man driving a Beetle, give him a wave. It's a good chance it's Des. And we'll make sure that people can connect to the Global Evangelist Network through a link in the description below. Des, give us a final thought to send us away with.
Oh, hey, yes. Don't look at the outward appearance. Look beyond that. That's kind of what I would say. There's value in the eye of the beholder.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thanks so much, Des. God bless you. God bless you all for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and like and comment on this video. We always love to hear from you. And of course, we will be back next time on Advanced Passion.